Hey y'all, I'm Andy. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that's been on my mind recently, which is self-criticism. I just finished my first year of grad school and I realized that this entire year I was very self-critical, and I just wanted to talk about it with y'all. I don't have a specific goal for this video other than discouraging self-criticism. For those of you who are not aware of what self-criticism is, it's just a tendency to be very hard on yourself. When you're not able to meet the standards that you have for yourself, you tend to evaluate yourself in a very negative way that just results in feelings of failure and unworthiness, which of course are not good. I'm sure we're all guilty of being self-critical at some point. In a lot of cases, these negative thoughts are just a habit of thinking that we have since we were really young. Some people just tend to be more self-critical than others. It can definitely be part of your personality. I also think it's important to note that the society that we live in isn't helping at all to break this pattern of self-criticism. More than ever, we're living in a time right now where a person's worth is defined by how successful they are. It's interesting because when you open up social media or any online platform, we see all these unrealistic expectations of how we should be, how we should act, where we should be in life by now. In this generation in particular, success is being reached at a very young age, and I feel like a lot of people feel pressured to reach success very early on, and when they're not, they tend to be very hard on themselves. It's really hard to not be self-critical when the internet in many ways actually just breeds self-criticism. I just felt very inclined to talk about this topic because I've been self-critical for as long as I can remember. I've also struggled a lot with feelings of insecurity and low self-esteem, which in many ways connect with self-criticism, and I think I finally reached a point where I've been able to take back control of my thoughts instead of letting them consume me. We're all self-critical for many different reasons. One of the main reasons I was stuck in this mindset was just, I think I was just prone to it. So I am the daughter of immigrants. My parents didn't go to school, but parents always implemented this idea that academic success equals success in life. So at a very young age, I've always had this pressure to do well academically, and as a consequence, I overworked myself a lot. And you know, I did get some rewards out of that. I got good grades. I've been able to attain the goals that I've set for myself, but at a very high cost, honestly. And I think one of the main reasons I was stuck with this self-critical mindset was because I would get good results, right? Growing up, I don't think I realized being self-critical was a bad thing until most recently, I would say in my early 20s. I was like, oh wait, maybe this isn't a good mindset to have. I worked really hard to get good results on paper. I needed that validation of good grades to be just a little less judgmental over myself. You know, maybe I'm not stupid. Maybe I'm not a failure, which is not a good way to think. It was just this constant cycle, and I still struggle a little bit with it, but I've gotten much better. This is definitely an example of a very unhealthy practice of self-criticism. Being self-critical when appropriate is definitely a healthy practice. Being self-critical can be positive when it allows for acknowledgement and assessment of failures and mistakes. For instance, if you said something that you're not proud of to somebody, I think it's appropriate to reflect and be like, hey, yeah, that wasn't okay. How can I improve in this aspect, See, that type of self-criticism encourages positive change. The type of self-criticism that isn't good for you is the excessive kind, the unnecessary, where you're being self-critical that it is mentally self-destructive. A lot of people are very dismissive of self-critical thoughts. They're like, oh yeah, it's whatever. But I feel like in the long run, it's a very consequential mindset to have. It can make you more prone to being depressed, feeling more anxious, at least for me. That's how it made me feel. Being self-critical can apply to a lot of different settings. I feel like that sometimes aren't as recognized. For example, like in our everyday life, I'm not the only one who feels like they're too self-aware in conversations sometimes. For instance, like I'll go to the grocery store, talk to the cashier, and maybe I forgot to say thank you. And then I get to my car and all I can think about is, oh my gosh, I didn't say thank you. I'm a terrible person. What must they think about me? Just overthinking conversations. This can also apply to conversations with a colleague or a friend. And you're just so hard on yourself for not having said something else, and it's just so unnecessary. The reality is that 9 out of 10 times, no one is judging you. Whatever you said was just fine. We think of ways the conversation could have gone better, and we hate ourselves for it. When it comes to performance in class, people also tend to be self-critical, myself included, of course. It's really important to acknowledge that we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different strengths in certain areas, and for some people, classes are going to be easier than for others. It's important to really understand that before you start comparing yourself to other students. If you're having difficulty in the class and you're saying things like, I'm never going to understand this, I'm so dumb, they are not helping you in any way. You're just reaffirming these inaccurate, self-sabotaging statements. Something that can be helpful in these circumstances, asking yourself maybe why you're not performing as well as you want to be. Maybe it's because you have a small background in that particular class. So you gotta have some self-compassion and realize, oh, okay, why am I have all these high expectations when I only know this much, right? Focusing on yourself and your own self-progress can help limit that self-criticism. I think something that we can probably all relate to is this feeling of just unworthiness whenever we don't have a productive day. So recently I've come to realize that sometimes humans are just meant to do nothing for a day. And what I mean by that is like not even a self-care day or anything like that. Sometimes we're just meant to do nothing, and that's completely fine. I'm actually the most productive when I limit my work days. So if you ever happen to have a day where you just really don't want to do anything, don't have these thoughts of feeling like, oh, I'm so lazy or I'm so useless. It's okay, and just recognize that you need a day to yourself, and that's completely fine. So I've been thinking really hard about ways to stop being self-critical, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a habit of thinking. So, you know, changing a habit can be really difficult. The first step to stop being self-critical is being able to recognize when you're having those negative thoughts. They've become so normalized that you might not even realize that you're being self-critical. Whenever you're having these negative thoughts, it's important to recognize it. And I think one, you can have like a positive mind shift in that moment, or you can also just recognize, hey, I'm having negative thoughts right now, but realize that they're going to pass. This is something that helps me with my anxiety. Like when I'm feeling very anxious, I'm like, okay, I feel anxious right now, but it's just a feeling, and feelings are temporary, so it'll go away. I think that's another way to approach it. The more you practice this, it'll help you understand that you're actually really in control of your mindset. Just remember that these negative thoughts are not actually reality. They're just thoughts. In moments where you feel like you're a failure, and you obviously know you're not, and I just think that's so funny to me, like, you know you're not, but you still feel like a failure. But anyways, I think what can be helpful to try to stop that is, this might sound a little funny, but just writing a list of all your accomplishments, and I think writing them on paper and seeing them, you'll have evidence of, hey, I'm not an actual failure. You can kind of relax and be like, okay, look at all these things that I've accomplished. I am in fact not a failure. This sounds a little silly, but it can actually be really helpful. I also want to comment on an observation that I've made about myself recently, where yes, I'm very self-critical, but a lot of times in my experience, I've sometimes used self-criticism as a way to distract myself from actually taking action in areas that I struggle in. In many ways, I think that self-criticism can actually hold you back from achieving great things. Overall, I think it's really important that we practice self-compassion, and it's just ridiculous how we tend to be our worst enemies, when really we should be our biggest supporters. It's really crucial that as humans, we are able to recognize that we're imperfect, we make mistakes, and that that's completely okay. We all know that humans are imperfect. For instance, if there was an audience here and I asked them, are humans imperfect? Everybody would raise their hand, right? So we're all aware of this information. Like, we're imperfect, we make mistakes, that's just who we are. Even though we consciously know this, we act like we don't. We're actually in a way ignorant, I think. When it comes to ourselves, we don't allow ourselves for mistakes, or Because if our friend is judging themselves, we try to discourage that, right? But why don't we do that with ourselves? It's not enough to know that we make mistakes, but really believe it. And I know that takes time, but once you're able to have self-compassion, we become more accepting of ourselves, and which then leads to less self-criticism. But again, I just wanted to share some thoughts with y'all because I know I'm definitely not the only one who feels this way. But that's it. Bye.